Thanks. It's not there, yeah. Well, that's all right. All the Methodist ones have gone, except
Do you take it personally on them?
I've been taking it personally for 30 years. No. Okay, my name's Lorimer, and I'm a Methodist minister. And actually, for some people who didn't know, I'm the minister in Jenny Methodist Church and the superintendent of Belfast North, which includes Jenny Mount, Joan Mount, Shankill, Glencairn, Woodvale. Now, I don't do all those with my colleagues. So, but it's where I'm based now for the last 3 years. 2019, that's when I came back to Jenny Mount. I candidated from Jenny Mount Church, so it's going back in time, and it's really an interesting experience. I'm also a psychologist, and I mix my ministry involves psychology and Methodist ministry, and has done from 2004 when I started to do it formally again. And the Methodist Church has been really kind to me and allowing me to do what was initially a pioneer project going out at Carlisle Circus. And I also worked in Monkstown for 10 years, where Neil was. And in Monkstown, I was a minister in the Church of the Good Shepherd, and I did therapy in the Monkstown Village Centre with Alan Johnson. Okay, and so my background in working, and Diane's asked me to come here today, and her words to me were to say some of the issues that bring church leaders to me. Now that's quite broad, and I'm going to home in on that a wee bit, and some of the things that maybe I've observed over the years without breaking any confidence, but there won't be any confidence broken, because problems that bring ministers to therapy are the same as it brings everybody else, in all honesty. But I just want to start off with something, and just to let you see that there's all the difference in the world between knowledge and awareness. And my doing workshops, I don't like to talk a lot like this. I preach enough on Sundays, and I try to cut these down to a minimum, because I love one-to-one work. I just love working with people on a one-to-one basis. So I'm actually doing this for Diane as a favour. Because I prefer workshops. I prefer a workshop environment where it's experiential. And so when I was listening here, I realised that at 25 minutes I'm not going to get a lot of experiential work done. And I had sort of been thinking with that in mind, but we may get something in. But I say that because in 2017 my mother died. And the day that my mother died, the next morning I had to go to Dublin to do an RTE service for well.com. And I couldn't get out of it because I was leaving it. So I had to go down, and that was the next day. And then my mother I found out on the Monday, she said that I was to do her funeral. So I did the funeral on the Tuesday, okay? And then that weekend I preached, and then I had to do the novena up in Clonard the following Tuesday. And then I had another week's retreat to do down in, I was leading the retreat in Tobawera for a week, silent retreat. And by the end of that then I had a car accident about August, and I crashed. And anybody who will tell you, any good psychologist will tell you that the year after a death, at the time after the death, that year, you're prone to accidents. Now I knew all this, but knowledge is not awareness. And as a minister, we are, and people who are in leadership, we think we know something because we know it and write a paper on it. But it's not the same as awareness. And my son, who did psychology, after the accident, I was really crying, feeling in bits. And I was sitting with my wife, and I said, I can't cope. And my son said to me, he says, sure, you know what it is. It's just post-trauma. It's trauma. And I said, yes, that's a 25-year-old can say that. I said, because it's all the difference between experiencing and knowing and thinking. And let's not confuse the two things. We're talking, when we deal with these leadership issues and deal with people, they're people. And ministers and leaders, wherever they come from, have the same problems that everybody has. And I actually think that is part of the problem. I didn't look at the obvious external stressors. And my experience of ministers and church leaders over the last 20 years is that when they come for therapy, it's the things that they think they should be able to cope with. They're just the normal everyday. The ministry elements are there. We can look at those specifically. There are specific issues around different types of ministry and working in ministry. But it's the fact that they forgot that commuting is stressful. Your mum dying is stressful. A family member dying. Children leaving home. All the normal stressors that we go through, and if you go through like the home's reign stress inventory, you can see the list of different stressors. Christmas is a stressor. Having no money, not enough money. Well, nobody ever is really stressed with too much money. But if you think of everything in life, some things are just like 11 points on the home's reign scale, like traveling, holidays, losing your job, maybe losing your job, conflict with your boss, conflict with your significant other. All these different things are the things that most ministers, like most people do, they just ignore and they build up. Like me, you feel, well, I've made a commitment to preach, I've made a commitment to go and do this retreat, I've made a commitment to go and do this, and they were all good things. But I shouldn't have done them. Because what came through from some of your slides is that people have a complete lack of self-care. And it's almost like when you start to talk to groups, it's another language. I may as well be speaking High Valerian. When you start to say self-compassion. I don't say self-love. Self-love can lead to narcissism. But self-compassion means you accept the dark side of yourself. Self-compassion means that you know you're a tube and you love your tubiness and you invite the tubiness to the table, just like Jesus invites people to the table. The Peters, the Judas. I'm surprised how often, how bad I am, how much I'm worried. You know, I want to think I'm the Messiah. And then that leads to problems and expectations. And then your self-esteem becomes trapped in that. That becomes a goal of life because you want to feel good about yourself and be happy. Wrong. Doesn't work. Self-compassion is where it starts. It's the only place to begin. Because if we can't have self-compassion, how can we ever get off the treadmill and not be stuck and help and serve other people? Because if we don't know how to do it ourselves, it just becomes we're doing it for our own ego. And nobody wants to hear that. Especially people in denominations. Because we should be out there, slaving away. Okay, and I'm just going with the flow here. In terms of stress, okay, just generically, stress is always seen as bad. Stress is not bad. Stress is just neutral. It's what happens is you can have good stress and bad stress. Eustress or distress. And when you're in life, and it's more like I'll be using this a lot, and hopefully you can see it. It's like BP, blood pressure. There is an optimum level of stress. When it's too low, you get bored, and when it's too high, you get distressed. Okay? Now that sounds knowledge, but I have to use words and knowledge to try and help experience this. It's good to have some stress. You perform better. I'm stressed before I come up here now. You know, that's normal. You know, you're looking at me as if I'm a weirdo. Yeah, you know me. And I would have liked Virgil van Dijk to have some stress the other night. I might have to stop Napoli. So you're in life, if we can see that stress comes, it's kind of positive, it can be positive and negative. But it's negative stress that I see. That's what brings people into therapy. And they come in because their own inner resources cannot match, are not adequate enough for the stressors they've felt. So if you've got a build-up of stress over a period of time, and that's the first thing I would look at in therapy. If I'm trying to see, it's normal then that you would feel it's time for self-care. It's time for taking time out for yourself and being kind to yourself and having duvet days and just being gentle. But people don't think, oh, I'll just keep going. I'll keep dragging myself out. I'll keep being driven. And that is not the way of the kingdom. Whether we like it or not, it's not the way of Christ. To be that driven, that you feel you have to go out. Now, I'm not a big one on duty, I have to be honest. I'm here today because of choice. I will go to my church on Sunday because of choice. I see clients because I choose to go. And people say, but if you don't go on Sunday, they'll have you before the church and you'll get kicked out and you have no money. I'd say that there's consequences to my choices. I like choices, but I don't want to be driven by duty. Not anymore. It's too tiring. The shoulds in your life just cripple you and lead to lack of creativity. Now that's a different ball game. I do one often, you'll maybe hear some of my hobby horses, but I don't want to. I want to help you see here that stress is normal. Stress in itself is something that can lead to us becoming more resilient. And that's another word, and I'll unpack that. I'm not too happy with that. Methodist, the DS, the district superintendents have asked me to do something on resilience, but I prefer flexibility rather than the term resilience. I think it's a harder term to measure. Resilience. Let me just try and get my head together because my head races. Okay, so bear with me. So in terms of stress, there are vulnerability factors. Christmas might be a passion for you. It might cause you to buzz, but for other people, it's a distress. And so I can tell you, over the years, I have more clients in January than any other time of the year because Christmas takes it out of it. Not just the financial elements, but having to smile at your family. It's not normal. Like funerals and weddings. You know what I mean? You have to pass yourself sometimes, but passing yourself just takes it out of you. And so January is a difficult time. And so some individuals will be distressed, some individuals will be buzzing on that particular stress or. And so some people, like we're looking at urban ministry here. The biggest horror for me, and nearly 30 years of being a Methodist minister, would have been if I had been stationed in a farming community.
Watch yourself.
Now, I come from it's without prejudice, it's bad for them. It's bad for them, it's bad for me. I grew up in Ballymena and everybody thinks I'm a farmer. I'm in a housing estate. Now, I would rather be in a housing estate any day of the week. I wouldn't have been particularly fond of nog either. I'm only joking. But what I'm trying to say is, what causes one person stress will not cause another person stress. And we have then, you're down to this, and I love, you use the word bespoke continually throughout your presentations. Everything has to be bespoke. My background is behaviourism, that's my theoretical background. It was behavioural therapy that I first worked in, and CBT was the second generation where you started to look at the thoughts as well as the behaviours. I used to do a lot more systematic desensitization and exposure work, if you're familiar with that stuff. And now it's third generation stuff. It's acceptance and commitment therapy, compassion focused therapy, mindfulness based cognitive behavioural therapy. And those are the models I would use. And all those models have in common the standing back from events. Movement is involved. Being kind to yourself and moving forward because we get stuck. Now, where was I? I lost the whole train of thought there. But anyway, I hope there was something valid in that. But what I want to do is I want to draw something. I'm trying to get the idea that people are stuck when they're overwhelmed. They're unique in how they deal with their particular distresses. Like some of the biggest distresses are not the big problems in life. So like stressors in a church, I'm just going to use this as an example. If you have a big scandal in the church, that's actually easier to handle. More easier to handle than most people think. You find the resources to deal with that particular situation. But what you can't deal with, and what gets to most people, and I'm speaking now as a minister now, it's the Sunday morning smile without the eyes smiling. You know, if you're sensitive to that sort of thing, and I am, you know, and you go out and you go, lovely Sarah. Lovely thing. Now that may not annoy you, but that annoys me. I go away going, tell me it's rubbish or tell me it's great, but don't falsely, passive aggressively tell me in your middle class language that is great. That may not cause you stress, but it causes me stress just being, I'm not used to that. You know, because I speak very directly. And so I'm not comfortable around language, circumlocatory language, it goes all around the country. You know, when you really want to say you're a Jew, right? So I'm like that in church, and so that's the thing that stresses me. But that happens over maybe a few years. It's the little foxes that eat the vine, as it says in the Song of Songs. It's the little foxes, the continual drip of bad relationships. You know, when you ignore things and let things slide, and that's okay. Sometimes you have to. But these are the things that end up breaking us as people. I'm just trying to gauge the room here because I think I've stunned you. Is that not true?
No, you said something that's very, very true.
The big deal, I can handle big things.
Yeah, it's not very true.
You know, eat away. Expectations, the voice in my head at 4 o'clock in the morning. I mean, last Sunday morning I woke up at 4, and I'm 60 now, and I used to say, you'll build resilience in preaching. And I believe that. I mean, it was hard at the beginning, and then public speaking of any description is difficult. But now I'm 60, I find the last 2 years, I find everything's very hard. I feel really nervous about everything, and I never used to be bothered. You don't think I'm nervous, I'm absolutely, it's just years of doing it. But I'm still nervous, I'm very nervous. And so I was waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning last Sunday, and I was going over in my head, and I was going, oh, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this. What do I do? How do I get it? And it was the script in my head that I had maybe developed over the years, that I get fused with, that I get bought into, of not being a fraud or you're not good enough. Some of you may have your own versions of these narratives. And we have them in our head, and we start minding, is a good psychology word. We start getting caught up in thought rather than in experience. But in the middle of the night, and I'm still practicing this stuff, I woke up and I was feeling all worked up. And I went into church and I preached, and I just said to my steward, I says, trained me this morning. What? And then his wife was coming behind me, and I says, I was very nervous. I go, hey, you're not nervous, how are you? Rise up. But they didn't know the 4 o'clock in the morning that we all get. That's when your body's at its weakest. And if you don't know that, then you buy into that and you feel alone. And that's what isolates us. Now, I'm going to quickly draw before part 2. I would want you to be involved in one of these, so I'm going to pick the one that you're not going to be involved in just for sake of time. Okay, so if you see this, there's the brain, okay? This is a compassion-focused, if you like, model, all right? So what we have is, we have, sort of, if you like, we have 3 systems, but this system here is the threat-based system. I know you can't see that, but you can't even spell it. Threat-based system, all right? And the threat-based system is all about anxiety, anger, and disgust, okay? And you would have that cortisol, all right, that gets released in the brain. And so we all have a threat-based system. It's a sort of reptilian part of our brain. And the threat-based system is what helps us survive. And we need it. You know, I often say to people, if I was walking out, you know, of my work on your road, if you're walking out late at night and you see a boy with a knife across the street, I'm praying to God that my anxiety kicks in, you know, because it'll make me a faster runner. Or else I'll feel like Bruce Lee and take him on. But the threat-based system is a survival mechanism. It's basic. And we say that anxiety is a problem. Anxiety is our friend. We don't like the sensations of anxiety, the mouth dry, the heart beating faster, the stomach churning, or the head light. We don't like those physical sensations, and we try to get rid of those. Especially if you're going around Tesco and all of a sudden it hits you. You know, because you're thinking of other things, and then all of a sudden you start to feel yourself panicking a bit. You don't want it there. You can't understand it, but it's normal. It's totally normal. I could go through and give you a full explanation as to why it is functionally important, and function is very important in my behavioural tradition. Do you want me to tell you why it's important? No, functionally.
Yeah.
Are you interested? Okay. Right. Right, if I go through it then, right, okay. So when you feel anxious, right, your stomach starts to churn. You know that feeling of your stomach going against the ear. Right. Why do you think that would be? What survival mechanism would that give you?
Make you lighter.
Lighter on your feet.
Yeah.
Because when you have your stomach churning, you wanna go to the toilet, defecate. Or urinate. Because, you know, if your bladder is big, you want to get rid of that stuff. And if you have a big burger in here and the boy's got a knife, right, you want to be light on your feet, you might throw up. You know, actors going on stage and you throw up. Okay. We've all these words running around our culture. the way to describe these things. You know, around here they would say, I don't defecate, they would say something else. When someone attacks them at life, and you're with myself, that's the polite version. But then also too, your heart starts to beat faster because it's pumping oxygen around your body. But you don't like it, you might go together. If you're sitting around Tesco or walking around, and your heart starts going to yes for no apparent reason, but it seems to be no apparent reason to you, you're going, oh my God, I have a heart attack. And then what happens? Well, then your brain goes, you're having a heart attack. Phone an ambulance. Right, so you can see how your interpretation of the event then cascades and leads to other problems. Your stomach churns. Also too, you want to empty your bowel, you want to empty your bladder, because why would you want to carry a big bowel and carry a full bladder around? That doesn't make any functional sense if you want to run or fight. So you want to be light. Okay? And also too, what happens is your feet get cold, or the extremities of your body get cold. You ever, you know, we have a saying, he got cold feet. Really did. Your feet get cold because the blood comes like this, the blood comes up like this, and it gives you a tingling sensation. The blood comes up from here. Do you know, nobody ever heard of cold feet and cold hands?
Yes.
You know, right. Head nods are okay, you know. I'm gonna say. So you've got that's happening, and that's because you see, if you're in a fight, then you're not going to bleed to death. That's a function. Now, God helped us this way. Okay. So you see where I'm coming from, that tingling feeling, but how some people may misinterpret that tingling feeling as being MS or something. Now, always check yourself out, but one thing is you can see how misinterpretation can lead to more problems. And your mouth goes dry because you're taking in more O2, and you're hyperventilating and going, and your head gets light because you don't really need the blood at the front here, you know, the frontal cortex. You don't need that online. You know what in James Bond movies where there's bombs going off and he goes, hey, I'll come out with a fancy quip. That's rubbish. You know what I mean? Because you can't do that. You're like this here. There's no way. You just want to survive. It's just fight or flight. You've never been chased to the police. Have you ever time to run around going, oh, this crack a joke about officers? It's not, you know, you fight or flight takes over. And so all those elements that we have are our friend, threat-based. Now, that's a tangent. I wanted to finish this quickly. And then the other system is our sort of resource system. Okay, I'll call it resource system. And that's where we want, we want food, shelter, reproduction, all the pleasurable stuff, because that's dopamine is the main receptor. It gets kicked off when we feel a success or when we feel we're doing well in life. You've got that new conservatory, or whatever it is your thing is. It's improved your shelter, and your dopamine has gone off, and you want to buy new things for it, and you're just being in your resource system. A sophisticated dog who's looking for a new pillow. Okay. I have a high view of humanity because I believe Christ is in all things. Okay. And what happens, Bob, is that there increases when that's going well, your self-esteem is high. That's why I'm not a big self-esteem type seeker person. There's nothing wrong with wanting to feel good about yourself as a value, but it becomes a goal, then that's all you strive for. And what happens in life is that ladder, we start falling down that ladder, and our self-esteem gets low. It will always, at some point, you will feel bad about yourself. Compare yourself with other people, compare yourself with other people in ministry, and what happens is we end up feeling bad about ourselves. Or you get sacked or something. Or somebody gives you a dirty look in church. Whatever it can be. And so when we're down here, what we start to do is we at the beginning we go to this, we start shouting at ourselves and criticising ourselves. Come on, get you on your feet. You need to go out there and do it. The Lord's called you to this. Double guilt. Why are you not being able to do this? So then that leads to a sense of shame. We shame ourselves because it becomes global. I can't do it. I'm not as good as everybody else. Shame is diabolical. Shame is, at least if you move to guilt, you're moving in the direction of some form of restitution. Shame kills us and cripples us. I am not good. And that's what leads to major depression. It's the root cause of most of the problems, is shame. And shame, then this becomes, when you mix anxiety and disgust, there's a sense of shame. Shame is really a mixture of anxiety and disgust. And this becomes your vicious circle. And you get stuck. trying to compete, and then as you get older, it gets harder because you can't compete. And this is the Western world's view, and our churches have bought into it, that the only thing that matters is success. And it's not. It's being. It's love. It's mirroring Christ. It's not Western values of capitalism, which we're seeing has destroyed so many people and is going to destroy so many people over the next 6 months. But when we buy into this sort of philosophy and then still call ourselves churches, we may as well just have MBAs instead of BDs. That's a lie. But that there. So what we need is we need some other place to go. And this is the soothing system. And this is what most of those leaders are asking for, from what I see on the presentation. You see, when you're feeling threatened and you get somewhere to go here, you're at that place where you can stand back from everything. Or when you're feeling washed out in your resource system, you have a place to go. It makes sense, and you're not going to believe this, but the soothing system, or the compassion-based system, the caring system, right? And once these systems take over, they influence your thoughts, your feelings, your behaviours, your motivations, and everything else. But the compassion caring system, it's oxytocins, and in your opiates, the amount of occurring opiates in the brain. And you wonder why so many young people want to take heroin. In a world which just demands that you be like, your success is measured by this stuff. And we're crying out for compassion. And I've been looking at Luke's Gospel this year, and the running theme of Jesus is compassion. The Good Samaritan story, unique to Luke. Go and do likewise. The one who shows mercy, kindness. And so people are coming, ministers are coming to therapy, just like everybody else is. Because people don't know this language of soothing system. And I'm not just talking about having a hot bath. A hot bath helps you to relax, and candles and a lot. I'm talking about something where you just open up the vagus nerve and you enter into that system of caring. And this is so much like what Jesus, I think, talks about. Loving kindness and compassion. It's visceral. It's not, I use words, but it's something more than that. And it's learning to be kind to yourself more than anything else. Is that? So the problems for most people, and my language has changed. I had to write something last year, and I used the word broken, and I saw it's on your title. And in the past year or so, I have shifted my language. People are not broken, they're stuck. And stuck, when you're stuck, whether it's you're stuck, you're moving away from what matters to you. And when we get stuck, there's no movement. But there's hope when you say they're stuck, because there's always the hope of movement. And any small movement is good, especially when you're depressed and when you're feeling on your own and ashamed. Movement. Any movement is good. I mean, if you go back into the Desert Fathers, the big passion was that of paying attention. And they were often asked, what do? You do what's in front of you right now with all your heart. It's the plough image. You know, don't just focus on the plough. No need to look back. Press on to the upward calling of God. There's a movement, a dynamism in this sort of model as there is in the gospel. Okay. I don't know if that answered your questions, but it's tend to...
No, I think that was really helpful, but I'm sure people want to ask you questions.
Oh, well, yeah, ask questions if you want. Yeah.
It's fine, because we've plenty of time for half an hour for discussion time, and then Kate and Linda are going to respond, but I'm sure people want to ask questions. That was so helpful, thank you.
I didn't know what I was going to do.
Oh, well, I know.
That's okay, that's a good thing.
But it was great. Yeah.
All right, feel free.
Now they're being dead shy.
No, it's okay. Sometimes maybe you just... And then another thing too is as well, is just be with what's going on in your body. It might be more visceral. I'm hoping it will be. And if it is in your body, you don't have to find the words. just be present to what's going on in your body. It may be that I have said something and that's either upset you and you're angry with it, and you're angry with me, or you're angry with your denomination or life. But that's okay. Feel it inside, or you're anxious.
You mentioned the Jesuit mothers and fathers, which I'm interested in, and it seems to me, in the light of whatever language you use to describe the current experience of the West, it is one of crisis. It's something's happening now. It's epic, and its effect in the life of the church is enormous. And we're only at the beginning of that effect. The next 100 years, we're going to see a massive marginalization of the church and a major challenge for Christians to find the language and the faith and the articulation publicly for what the church is and what we believe and how we might act. So my question is something based on your therapeutic approach. My question is something like, what traditional historical disciplines in the church, like monasticism, like the Desert Mothers and Fathers, which was about an interior life, a reflective life, a life that wasn't driven by the Protestant work ethic, and I'm not knocking the Protestant work ethic, but it wasn't. When you look both as a church leader and as a therapist, are you able to suggest? I know it's a big question, but are you able to suggest changes to our devotional life, changes to our spiritual practices, changes to how we self-care spiritually, in the light of that epic change?
Thank you, Derek. And that's not a difficult question. That's just what I would love to hear, because I'm going to say now what I think. Because for the last 20 years, I have been looking at mindfulness-based approaches within Christianity and how it could be integrated. And I spent most of my time looking at contemplative prayer over the ages. And I didn't finish the PhD because I ended up opening Well.com. And Well.com involved that rhythm of prayer. Now I'm leaving here in the next couple of hours. I'm going to Corrymeela and I'm leading a weekend on centering prayer. It's an introduction to centering prayer weekend. And centering prayer, and for those who aren't familiar with centering prayer is in the contemplative tradition. It's all about the intention of the heart and being still and practicing being in the internal, and also to the reading of scriptures and all that, to being a monastic style, rather than a sort of a step-by-step approach, but coming at it in different ways is another way that involves the centering prayer tradition. And they would be a big part of my life. And I would say that most people who come to me who are atheists and come from all walks of life, people are still hungry for meaning and they want a way. People are saying, what is the way?
But is there a conversation to be had around the institutions? So is there a conversation to be had around, for me, right, so I come from the Catholic tradition and I am unhappy with my church and how my church presents itself in the world. Alright, so I had a conversation there recently about Methodism and you know, if you had your choice, what religion would you choose or where would you go? And the Methodist church, I'm not saying this just because you're there, but the Methodist church for me is a church that lives and breathes its community and is of its community. It has its faults as well. But there's something around the institutions are so caught up in protecting the institutions. And maybe this is part of what you're asking to Derek, that the institutions become more important than the people. And the institution's protection of itself has become more important, and that is certainly true of the Catholic Church. So at what point do people start to matter again? Because what you've done this morning is life-changing. It's just unreal. And I'm sorry I'm emotional. People have had this journey for 2 years. People have been broken or stuck because they've been in this system and we've forgotten. Yeah, we've forgotten compassion. And I'm sorry, I was supposed to
That's
speak
all right.
there, and it's terrible, but
You're fine.
Jesus, excuse me, Jesus out loud in the middle of the church then. So, anyway, but for me, we've forgotten people, and we've forgotten how to unstick people. So bringing people to a church service with a rhythm and a ceremony and all of that is good, but there's a desire out there for something new and something different. Not shiny and new and jubbly and you know, all displays, and not pomp and ceremony, but the fundamentals of what the church can offer, I think, has been lost in a world that is so fast moving, and that opportunity to sit and to be and to meditate and to have mindfulness is not being sold or taught by the church in any way, nor is it being taught by them. So turning up on a Sunday in your best gear is what's important. Not being there quietly in the church, calling in Monday to Friday and sitting with your thoughts and being enabled to sit with your thoughts. We have forgotten to teach people how to pray. So I have small people in my house, and they are being taught in our house how to pray. They're being taught the words in school, but they're not being taught how to pray in themselves. They don't know how to be still. They don't know how to be bored. You know, and that's part of compassion and self-care, because it's abuse to be sitting on your mobile phone all the time, being constantly entertained. But we're not allowing our kids to find that space. We're not allowing our communities to find that space to just be still and be quiet. Do you know, and so there's something for me around what you said this morning, and that this busyness that we're all caught up in, and this constant series of guilt and disgust about who we are and what we are and how we've ignored everybody else. There's something over here around this compassionate model, which is about being quiet and being still. Sorry, I've taken up the whole floor.
No, you haven't. Well, you're processing for yourself, and you're right. In terms of the question about the institutional church and all, these are all things, different questions. I have to say, the Methodist Church has been very good as an institution to me, and I say that in places, and I'm not a sort of a lick. Far from it, like, you know what I mean? But I can't deny that they've given me the room. And I'm doing something prayer this weekend. It's full of Catholics. It's all Protestants. Loads of people there, and they come along. We share silence together. And I've been doing that for 10 years, Kate. You know, I'm saying there's other people doing this, and they're out there.
But I look at people of no faith, and I look at people, like, I suppose part of the upset this morning is around the number of phone calls I've had in the last 3 weeks from people who are just saying, I can't believe you took 5 weeks off, you were so right. And I did, I took a break. Because not just me, but there are so many people who are sitting here, who are just leaving the sector, leaving work. They're hemorrhaging out because they are broken. And they're broken because of the pandemic, because they've buried people, because they've lost family. You know, there's so many. It just makes sense.
I mean, I think listening to even some of what Liz Truss was saying, you know, let's stop the tea breaks, let's stop them getting working more. Whereas I actually think the best thing to do is to treat people with respect, and they give them space, and people are creative. But the churches really are an institution. They're institutions that can be fallen, but they can be redeemed. And that's what Reformation is about. And maybe we're going through not only a massive shift in the Western world in terms of how we approach economics, how we approach human relationships. I mean, we're living in one of the greatest turmoils. Probably the Queen's death represents some big change, you know, for a certain generation. It's the end of something, a time, history, or whatever. And so I don't even know where to begin. All I know is I'm just going to be still and kind. And I don't know anything else. Kind to people and kind, and I'm not that good at it because I eat the face very quickly.
I think there is a big need for, and I think the best of our theologians will do this for us, and they're being best of our theologians. I think there is a need for discernment of what is happening. I think that's really important, and I think to find language and words and a biblical perspective on what is happening, what's how did the church with such speed find itself on the back foot and profoundly marginalised, treated with great